My name is Arthur, and after 40 years of designing cities, of navigating the labyrinth of zoning laws, municipal codes, and public works projects, all I wanted in my retirement was a small piece of quiet. After my wife, Martha, passed, the big house felt too empty. So I bought a modest home in a quiet, manicured subdivision called Willow Creek, a place with identical mailboxes and perfectly edged lawns. My only ambition was to cultivate the most beautiful rose garden in the neighborhood, a tribute to Martha. I was looking for peace. Instead, I found Brenda. Brenda was the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek, the president of our homeowners association. She was a woman who wielded a 3-ring binder full of bylaws like a scepter, a petty tyrant who derived her life's purpose from measuring the height of her neighbor's grass. She drove a golf cart around the neighborhood, her eyes narrowed, searching for infractions. And for some reason, from the moment I moved in, she made me her special project. The first shot in our one-sided war was fired over flowers. I had spent a month preparing a new rose bed, and I planted 3 beautiful, vibrant yellow rose bushes, Martha's favorite. 2 days later, a crisp white envelope was in my mailbox. It was a formal warning from the HOA. Violation of Bylaw 7, Section C, Floral Arrangements. The approved color palette for floral displays in the Willow Creek subdivision is red, white, or pink. Please rectify this violation within 14 days. I was stunned by the sheer absurdity of it, but I was new here. I didn't want to make waves. I sighed, dug up the yellow roses, and planted red ones. I thought that would be the end of it. It was only the beginning. Brenda, it seemed, had found her new favorite hobby, persecuting me. A week later, I received a $50 fine because my lawn was, and I quote, approximately half an inch above the regulated maximum height of 3 inches. The next week, it was a $75 fine because my trash receptacle was visible from the street for a period exceeding 4 hours post-collection. Then came the $100 fine for the color of my mailbox, which was, apparently, an unapproved shade of forest green, in contrast to the approved evergreen shade. It became clear what this was about. Brenda was pushing for a massive, completely unnecessary renovation of the small community pool and clubhouse. The project was wildly expensive, and the contractor she was championing for the no-bid contract was, as I later found out, her brother-in-law. She needed to whip the votes at the next big HOA meeting to approve a special assessment fee on every household. Most residents were against it. So she was using this campaign of petty harassment, this financial water torture, to try and break me, the quiet new guy, to make an example of me, to show everyone that she was in charge. I knew arguing with a person like Brenda was pointless. You cannot win a fight with a zealot. So I did the one thing she never expected. I complied. Every time a fine arrived, I paid it promptly without a word of protest. But with each check I mailed, I also sent a polite, formal email to the HOA. Board, Dear HOA Board, I would write, I have paid the attached fine. For my records, could you please provide me with a digital copy of the complete, unredacted HOA meeting minutes from 2010 to 2015? The next week, it would be the minutes from 2016 to 2020. Then I requested the complete financial statements, the bylaws, the architectural review guidelines. I was building an archive. Brenda and her cronies on the board thought it was hilarious. I heard from a friendly neighbor that she had laughed about it in a board meeting. The old man in number 42 thinks he's going to find a loophole, she had apparently sneered. He's just wasting his time collecting paper. They saw my requests as the pathetic thrashing of a man they had already beaten. They had no idea that I wasn't just collecting paper. I was gathering ammunition, and they were handing it to me, one polite email at a time. The final piece of the puzzle I needed was not in their files. It was a public record. I took a trip to the county records office, a place I knew as well as my own living room from my 40 years as a city planner. I requested the original subdivision plats and property deeds for the Willow Creek development, filed back in 1988. The clerk brought out a long, heavy tube of blueprints and a thick, dusty ledger. I spent the rest of the day in a quiet corner of the records office, a magnifying glass in my hand, poring over the documents that were the very foundation of my neighborhood. And that's when I found it. It was a tiny error, a single overlooked detail in a mountain of legal descriptions and surveying lines. But in my world, a tiny error in a deed can be as devastating as a crack in the foundation of a skyscraper. When the original developer, a company called Sunwood Homes, had built the subdivision, they had deeded over each residential lot to the new homeowners. They were also supposed to sign over the common areas, the parks, the greenbelts, the land the pool was on, and crucially, the private roads to the newly formed homeowners association. And they had, almost. I saw the error in the legal description of the land transfer. They had transferred Lot A, the park, and Lot B, the pool. But they had forgotten Lot C, a long, thin, strangely shaped parcel of land. I cross-referenced it with the main plat map, and a cold, beautiful, exhilarating chill ran down my spine. Lot C was the road, not just a road. It was the road, the single private road, Willow Creek Lane, that provided the only access from the main highway to every single one of the 200 homes in our subdivision. Legally, according to the official records of this county, the street we all lived on was not owned by the HOA. It was still the private property of Sunwood Homes. My heart was pounding now. I did a quick search for Sunwood Homes. As I suspected, the company had gone bankrupt 15 years ago. It was a defunct corporation, its assets dissolved, its owners long gone. But a defunct corporation can still, technically, own property. And that forgotten, untitled piece of land was one of its last overlooked assets. I returned home that evening, the copies of the deeds and maps spread out across my dining room table. It was a fortress of paper. I looked at the map, at the single road that held the entire neighborhood together. Brenda thought she controlled the neighborhood because she had a rule book. She had no idea that I was about to own the ground beneath her feet. Her campaign of petty tyranny over my yellow roses was about to end with me holding the deed to her entire world. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. "I have a project for you," I said. "I need you to find out how one goes about purchasing the remaining assets of a defunct corporation." A slow, calculated smile spread across my face. The game was about to change. And Brenda, the queen of Willow Creek, had no idea she was about to be checkmated. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Davies, no relation, thankfully, to my tormentor, was initially skeptical when I called. But when I laid out the notarized copies of the original deeds and the subdivision plat map on her conference room table, her skepticism turned into a wide, disbelieving grin. "Mr. Henderson," she said, shaking her head in admiration. "In 30 years of practicing property law, I have never seen a mistake of this magnitude go unnoticed for this long. This is beautiful." The legal process was surprisingly straightforward. Because Sunwood Homes was a long-defunct entity, its remaining assets were in a state of legal limbo, managed by a larger holding company that had bought up the bankrupt firm's portfolio decades ago. To them, Lot C was a meaningless line item, an accounting error they probably didn't even know they had. My lawyer drafted a formal offer to purchase the full assets of the Sunwood Homes Corporation. The offer was, to be frank, an insult. It was a few $1,000s, barely enough to cover the holding company's legal fees for processing the paperwork. And they accepted it instantly. They were likely thrilled that some old man wanted to pay them to take a piece of worthless, untaxed land off their books. 2 weeks later, after a flurry of paperwork, it was done. For the grand total of $5,000 and some legal fees, I, Arthur Henderson, a quiet retiree, became the sole owner and CEO of the newly reactivated Willow Creek Management Company, whose only asset was the single road and all the common land of the subdivision I lived in. I told no one. I just filed the new deeds quietly at the county records office. Meanwhile, Brenda escalated her war. My quiet compliance was, I think, driving her mad. She wanted a fight, a reaction, and I was giving her nothing but signed checks. The violation notices became more frequent, more absurd. I received a fine for unseasonable lawn decorations because I had a small gnome in my garden. I received a warning that the paint on my house trim was fading at a rate inconsistent with community standards. She was building a case to portray me as a negligent homeowner, a problem resident, all to justify her power grab at the upcoming meeting. I just kept paying, and I kept smiling and waving at her as she patrolled the neighborhood in her Golf cart. I was the calmest, most compliant resident she had ever seen. She had no idea that she was harassing her new landlord. The night of the big HOA meeting arrived. The community clubhouse, which was, I noted with some amusement, legally my property, was packed. The air was thick with tension. The main event was Brenda's proposal for the $300,000 pool renovation and the special assessment fee of $1,500 per household to pay for it. Brenda stood at the front of the room, a smug, confident smile on her face. She gave a long, rambling speech full of fear-mongering about declining property values and the importance of maintaining our community's prestige. She made several pointed remarks about certain new residents who do not share our commitment to excellence. Finally, she called for the vote. But before anyone could raise their hands, I stood up. "Before we vote," I said, my voice calm but loud enough to fill the room, "I'd like to raise a point of new business." Brenda's face tightened. "This is not the time, Mr. Henderson," she snapped. "We are in the middle of a vote." "I believe this is precisely the time," I said, walking slowly towards the front of the room, "as this business directly concerns the financial viability of this entire association." I arrived at the front table and placed a neat, slim folder. On it, "I am here tonight, not just as a resident," I announced. "I am here as the owner of the Willow Creek Management Company, a private entity that holds the deed to this clubhouse, the park, the pool, and most importantly, the road you all used to get here tonight." A wave of confused murmuring spread through the room. Brenda stared at me as if I had just started speaking in tongues. "What nonsense are you talking about?" She spat. "The HOA owns the common areas." "Actually," I said, "it does not." I opened the folder. Inside was a large, newly printed and certified plat map of the neighborhood. I spread it on the table for everyone to see. Due to a clerical error in the original development filing in 1988, I explained, a parcel of land, designated as Lot C, was never legally transferred to the HOA. "This parcel," I said, tracing the red line I had drawn on the map with my finger, "encompasses Willow Creek Lane and all associated common areas. The company that retained ownership went bankrupt in 1999, and last Tuesday, I purchased that company and all its assets in full. Here is the newly registered, legally binding deed." I handed the deed to the HOA's treasurer, a nervous man, who actually understood what he was looking at. He stared at the document, his face going completely white. He looked up at Brenda. "He's right," the treasurer whispered, his voice trembling. "It's all registered with the county. He owns the road." The room erupted into chaos. People were shouting, demanding an explanation. Brenda was speechless, her face a mask of pure, horrified disbelief. I held up a hand for silence. As the private owner of this property, I continued, my voice cutting through the noise, I am announcing a few changes. Effective tomorrow morning. At 6 a.m., a private security firm will be installing an automated gate at the entrance to Willow Creek Lane. Access for residents will be granted via a monthly Ease Pass toll of $100 per vehicle. Non-resident visitors will, of course, be charged a higher rate. Furthermore, the community park and pool are now private property and are closed to the public, effective immediately. I will, however, be happy to negotiate a lease agreement with the HOA for these amenities at a fair market rate, which I estimate to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 a month. The chaos turned to panic. I had them. The entire neighborhood was, for all intents and purposes, landlocked. They were hostages in their own homes. Brenda finally found her voice. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "I can," I said calmly. "And I will. It is my legal right as the property owner." I let the terror of their new reality sink in for a long, delicious moment. Then I delivered the checkmate. "However," I said, my voice softening slightly, "I am a reasonable man. I have no desire to be a landlord. I am prepared to sign over the deed to Lot C, transferring all common areas and the road to the homeowners association, completely free of charge." A wave of desperate relief washed through the room. Brenda looked at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes, thinking she might somehow survive this. "Double quotes ... under two simple conditions," I finished. Condition 1. The proposal for the $300,000 pool renovation is to be permanently and irrevocably canceled. And Condition 2. Brenda and her entire hand-picked board of directors will submit their resignations in writing, effective immediately, right now. The room exploded again, but this time it was with applause. The residents, finally empowered, turned on Brenda. Her reign of terror was over, and they were cheering for her execution. She stood there, humiliated, defeated, with 200 of her neighbors staring at her with undisguised contempt. Trapped, with nowhere to run, she and Hand. Her cronies had no choice. They signed a hastily written resignation note on the spot. An interim board was elected from the cheering crowd. The next morning, true to my word, I met with the new board and signed the deed, transferring the land to its rightful owners. My work was done. A few weeks have passed. Life in Willow Creek is quiet again. The new board is reasonable and fair. And yesterday, they held their first official vote. It was a unanimous decision to remove Bylaw 7, Section C, from the rulebook. This morning, I went to the nursery. I bought 3 of the most beautiful, vibrant yellow rose bushes you have ever seen, and I planted them right in my front garden, for the whole world and for Martha to see. They are, I must say, perfectly compliant.